This is the biggest increase in deaths we've seen since records began. The figure of 32 dead is up from 25 only yesterday.
These hospitals aren't designed to deal with this, and I think the minute you're getting hospitals running at 200% and 300% capacity, I think that speaks for itself. It's incredibly serious.
That was an Australian news station reporting from the island nation of Samoa in 2019. And if it seems familiar, it may look and sound like the kind of news reports we saw from all over the world in 2020 during the global COVID pandemic. But this was not about COVID, and this all happened before COVID. This was 2019, this outbreak in Samoa. It killed more than 80 people, many of them young kids. The government had to order lockdowns to try to save people's lives. Charities from around the world had to ship children's coffins to Samoa to deal with a shortage of coffins there for all the little kids and babies who were dying. What Samoa was experiencing in 2019 was an epidemic of measles, a preventable epidemic. And I say that because measles is a disease for which there has been an effective vaccine available for more than 60 years. That entirely preventable disease outbreak in Samoa in 2019 is now newly relevant because one of the factors that contributed to that outbreak was a sudden onset of hostility to vaccination on the island. And that hostility was stoked in large part by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who Donald Trump has just tapped to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy's anti-vaccine organization, Children's Health Defense, very aggressively spread anti-vaccine propaganda, not only in the United States, but around the world. And in Samoa, they claimed that the measles vaccine itself was the cause of the outbreak and not the solution to it. RFK Jr. personally lobbied the governor of Samoa, telling the governor that vaccination was what caused the spread of measles, not what needed to be done to stop the spread of it. And that's insane. As journalist Brian Deere writes in a new op-ed for the New York Times today, quote, "I was in Samoa during that outbreak as part of my more than 16 years of reporting on the anti-vaccine movement. The cause of the outbreak was not the vaccine, but most likely an infected traveler who brought the virus from New Zealand, which that year had the biggest measles outbreaks in decades, especially among that country's indigenous and Pacific Islander communities. Migration and poverty were likely factors in a sudden spread of measles in Samoa and in New Zealand. But as an editorial in the New Zealand Medical Journal reported, so too was a factor that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. specializes in, quote, increasing circulation of misinformation, leading to distrust and reduced vaccination uptake." Joining us now is Brian Deere. He's a journalist and the author of the book, The Doctor Who Fooled the World, about the anti-vaccine movement. Mr. Deere, I really appreciate you taking time to join us today. Thank you.
Pleasure, Rachel. Nice to be here.
I think that since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. associated himself both with this presidential election, first as an independent candidate, and then secondly with Donald Trump, now especially since he's been put forward for this very powerful health post, I think Americans have started to hear about his very troubling role in this deadly outbreak in Samoa. But I still think the concept of it, the idea of it, is fuzzy to a lot of people. Can you describe to us the nature of the outbreak, how severe it was, and why he's associated with it and thought to be partially responsible for the death toll?
Well, the plot thickens from what you were saying a moment ago, in that it's almost certain that the virus got into Samoa by flight from Auckland. And just a little while before that, friends of Kennedy had been in Auckland, in New Zealand, with a film which had been promoted in the United States by Robert De Niro and got a lot of attention in the United States, which was suggesting that there was fraud at the CDC in Atlanta. There actually wasn't. So they'd been touring in Auckland and South Auckland, with a lot of Pacific Islander communities there, which became very, very susceptible. It was there that year New Zealand saw the biggest outbreak of measles in decades. So it was no surprise, really, that that virus did get onto an aircraft and got its way out to Samoa. And Mr. Kennedy really has questions to answer about his relationship with the people who made that film. It was called Vaxxed, and Mr. Kennedy became the executive producer of a sequel, Vaxxed 2, and was a close colleague of the people who went out to New Zealand and also to Australia to promote fear of vaccines. So that's where it came from, and the catastrophic consequences that I witnessed on the island. I spent much of a week of the time I was there just simply talking to mothers about the loss of their children. And it was really awful to listen to them. And I found myself at the end of it all just sitting in a cathedral and crying and crying. I couldn't stop crying as the accumulation of pain from these mothers really consumed me. It was awful.
Why would somebody like RFK Jr. have influence in a place like Samoa as to whether or not people vaccinated their kids? Why would his influence in particular be something that sort of perniciously accelerated the risk there?
Well, his name opens doors. He's always known that. I mean, he's really not a lot more than his name, is he? He's not a particularly good lawyer. He pays himself, the last time I looked, $500,000, $500,000 a year to run Children's Health Defence, which he set up himself. But he's not a particularly distinguished man in his own right. But he got out to Samoa, he went to visit them, he went to see the Prime Minister, and as you say, tried to convince the Prime Minister that it was in fact the vaccine that was causing the deaths and not the measles virus. Extraordinary thing to do, but, you know, he's been making this kind of mischief for many years now.
Journalist and author Brian Deer, the author of The Doctor Who Fooled the World. Mr. Deer, I appreciate you being with us for this, and I'd love to have you back to talk a few more about this in the future, if you don't mind. Great. Thank you very much for your time tonight.